Judge Anthony Scirica is on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. He received, and this is the part that I find so interesting, where they went to school. He received his undergraduate degree from Wesleyan University and his JD from Michigan. Following his graduation, following the receipt of his JD, he was in private practice for a number of years. And I'll need to talk to you about how the years fit together, because in your bio I wasn't quite sure, but then was an assistant district attorney during that period, was also a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and then was a judge in the Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas, and then was a U.S. District Court judge on the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, and now is in Philadelphia on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. I'll share an anecdote of several years ago. I attended one of the talks Judge Niemeyer gave, and I asked him at the end of it if I were too old to be a law clerk and to apply for clerkship. And knowing his law, he couldn't disqualify me on the basis of age, but he suggested that I step aside and let the students have one of the clerkship instead of myself.
Big mistake.
I'm still going to apply. Judge Paul Niemeyer's on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. He received his undergraduate degree from Kenyon College and his JD from the University of Notre Dame. Two football powers, and I went to the Duke game on Saturday, and I'm sorry to say I'm feeling a little outflanked by these two football teams. After receiving his JD, Judge Niemeyer practiced law for a number of years and then also served as a district court judge, but for the District of Maryland. And he was appointed to the Fourth Circuit in 1990, and I don't think I said that you were appointed to the Third Circuit in 1987. They're going to have wonderful, I clerked, I was a clerk on the Fourth Circuit when I graduated from Duke Law School, and it was an incredibly wonderful experience, as it would have been had it been on the Third Circuit as well, I'm certain. Just a wonderful experience, but I didn't have an opportunity to talk to anyone before I clerked, so this is a great opportunity for you to sort of ask the questions that are burning. And I think they've decided that they're going to stand and roam.
We can sit or stand.
Whatever they feel comfortable with, I'm sure you do. And I leave it to the two of you to decide the format. I think that you
Good.
are probably
Oh, thank you. Go ahead.
How do you want to do this?
Let
Let me ask a question.
Third Circuit
How many
always defers to
1Ls do we have? All 1L. How many? Any 2Ls? Okay, because the season on 2Ls, you know, is maybe a little late, but it's worth talking about. And actually, I keep hearing from more and more judges that have not hired their clerks yet. It's a very confusing year and a confusing process, and we'll try to set some of that out for you today. But so that the 2Ls, I wouldn't give up on the process at all. And what happens often is that the circuit court judges go early, but they're spread out everywhere. And then often the district court judges hold back and say they're not going to start until the circuit are finished. They don't want to compete in the process. And so you have a season that's probably going to extend out into the spring. I don't know, is that what you've been hearing, Tony? And so it's probably worth, you'll probably gain something from, if we can share anything with you from today. But the 1Ls, it's not getting too soon, I guess. That's why you're here. Do you want to give an overview, or you want me to give an overview? Or
You're doing great. Why don't you go ahead? I'll sit down and put my feet up.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll try to give a little bit of the timing first, and then we can talk about what an application should do and who you might want to apply to. The timing has been a very difficult problem for the students and for the judges, and the professors blame the judges for keep going earlier and earlier, and the judges keep blaming the students for applying earlier and earlier. And so there is a little bit of an uncontrolled marketplace, and we don't know when the beginning and when the end of any clerkship season is. There was a period of time where we had sort of an agreed upon period of time. It was February 1 of 2L year, where you shouldn't get your application in before then, and the law schools were not supporting applications up until then. And then the judges were supposed to hold on to them stacked neatly on their desks until March 1 and not extend an offer until then, or to have them into interview. Well, I think the February one worked pretty well. The March one didn't, because as soon as the applications start coming in, the judges start looking through the applications and they see applicants they like and start calling them in for interviews. And so the process generally up to recently was a February March period of time when the clerks were hired. A lot of judges, I imagine a large majority of the judges, said that was too early because you had, usually you had your 1L grades and the first semester of 2L, and that's all we could judge by and look in your applications and your undergraduate record. And so most people would have preferred it to be a little later. But as that started breaking down, and we didn't have your grades for 2L, then what's the difference if you apply in February or October, the previous October? We still don't have your grades for the first semester. And so the last 2 years, last year, applications started coming in fast and thick about December, late October, and from my own point of view, and Judge Scirica can share his with you, from my own point of view, when you get a stack of a certain size, I started looking at them, and if I saw applicants that I liked, I'd call them in. And so it depends when I got the applications as to when I started the process. And this year has gotten even more bizarre. I think the applications started, and Duke was right with them. The advice you've been getting from your group here has, I think, been right with the market. But when did you have them sent out this year? Most people, October?
September.
Late September, October. So the problem is for you that you're looking at the end of this, most of your 1Ls, when you come back in the fall for 2Ls, you're looking at getting a job for your summer, the following summer, and that's a little more structured these days, and at the same time doing clerkships and trying to keep your studies going at the same time, and it's very troublesome for you. The question is, when should you send them out? And I know I get calls. Tom Metzloff calls me and says, "Are you accepting?" I say, "Tommy, whenever they come in, you look at them." And I think that's the way most judges react. And so the schools start looking at each other and saying, who's going first and when are you going to send in the applications? My guess is you ought to be thinking about launching early when you start in your 2L year. I don't know if that's the advice they're giving you. It may be you can hold off, but that's when you ought to be thinking about, I think. And some judges who go early may call you in. And then, of course, you've got this terrible problem. You've got 3 judges you've researched and you like, and let's say your third favorite judge calls you in for an interview, and he calls you in September 15th of that week or something like that, and Judge B, who is your second favorite, he hasn't even responded yet, and Judge A, he's going to put it off for a month. Now you go and interview Judge C, who was your third favorite, and he happens to like you and gives you an offer. How do you react? And the right reaction probably is, unless you're very confident in yourself, that you take what you get. Every time if you get an offer and you apply to somebody, you ought to be prepared to accept it. And if he gives you a little bit of time, you may tell him, well, I've also got applications out and I had interviews scheduled. And you'll get some sympathy, I think, for that. But the judges have to look out for themselves too. And so you get this funny broken apart system where you may not ever get to talk to the judges you wanted. It's a little bit of when the judge is going to call you in. So that may call for a notion that you apply to judges who you are prepared to accept, and may not have as many interviews. You want to comment on the timing and give your viewpoint on that?
I think you did it beautifully on that. It's a free-for-all, and it shouldn't be that way, particularly for lawyers and judges, especially who are used to living by the rule of law and according to certain procedural rules. I think you've got to be guided by what your school tells you. You will be advised that now's the time to send them in, and you better do it at that time. The ideal world would be to do this between the second and third years. The spring of the second year is okay as well. The winter is less okay, but okay. But the fall is way too early to my mind. Those of you who are second year students, there's still a lot of judges, including appellate judges, who have not hired all the clerks. I have not hired all my clerks. I got very busy this fall on matters, and I haven't done it. And lot of my colleagues on the Third Circuit have not completed their hiring yet. Others have. But I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, do I want a clerkship? Is it a good way to spend a year, particularly when you may have loans you want to pay off, and you may have family obligations, and law firms may be offering you a very attractive salary. I can't think of any good reason not to do it. It's a wonderful year. Whether it's a trial or an appellate court, you get to see how a judge functions, and more importantly, you get to help that judge function. And so it's a very satisfying experience as well as a great learning experience. And you get to watch lawyers and the whole operation. It also gives you some time to reflect as well, to think where you want to go. You may really enjoy litigation now, but you may not end up there. You may think you want to be a transactional lawyer, or you may want to be a family lawyer, or whatever. It gives you another year to think about that. Certainly in terms of experience for work as a lawyer, I think it's very beneficial. And I wouldn't worry too much about the status part. A lot of students want an appellate clerkship, maybe a federal appellate clerkship. In many ways, the trial clerkship is the better clerkship. There you really get to see how a judge functions on a daily basis. You get to watch the lawyers pick juries and give opening and closing statements to the juries. You help the judge with evidentiary questions. I used to have my clerks sit in on settlement conferences. I'd stick them in the corner of the room, tell them, just keep quiet, watch. It's a tremendous learning experience. I think less so on the appellate court. On the appellate court, though, we have time to think about some of the tough issues that we face. And so if you really love to read and write and to work out difficult problems, then an appellate clerkship may be the way to go. The state courts, they're wonderful state judges in both the trial and the state system. So don't think you've got to have a federal clerkship in order to make it worthwhile or meaningful. You can have a wonderful experience in any of those. So I think the only downside to doing it is perhaps the financial one. And if you can handle that, I think it's very worthwhile. Clerks tell me over and over again, it's one of the best years of their lives. It's, they look back on it with tremendous fondness. So I think,
yeah, I think
it's worth the exploration.
I was going to say, I'd like to second the value of the clerkship. I think the value is like, it's a fourth year of academics. It's, you're doing exactly what you do in the classroom. If you like the law, you like to debate the law, you're doing it with a judge, and it's applied academics. It's going to mean something in a case. And the relationship between clerk and judge gets very close. You're always going to be your judge's clerk, and it's a lifetime thing. My clerks call me, early clerks call me. Every move they make, they call, and we talk about career moves and good ideas and bad ideas, and they come for cookouts and things like that. And, it's a it is something that I think everybody should do, is mandatorily if we could arrange it, and I think everybody would like it. I don't think there should be a hesitation on your part. Financial is terrible. It's slave wages. I don't know what they pay now in the federal clerkship. It's close to $40,000, and you go out and you can now get 6 figures, can't you, if you just go out of law school? And so it's a big hit, but you're taking a hit right now. Actually, you're paying them to come here, aren't you? And, so at least we'd be paying you a little bit when you come. But, how do you select where to go? I don't know the answer to that, but I would suggest that you can assess your own suitability and talk with your professors. I think the federal clerkships are a national competition that probably break down into east-west geographical areas. I think those people who are west of the Mississippi seem to gravitate that direction, and east likewise. There may be sub-geographical areas. You're from Atlanta, and you say, all right, I sort of like to be down there, around there. But there's no reason why, even if you want to practice in Atlanta, you wouldn't clerk in Cincinnati or St. Louis or Chicago or New York or wherever. And the same law is being applied everywhere. And so I don't think you should necessarily limit yourself to the judge in the particular area you want to practice. It would be nice, maybe, if you like the judge, but it's a national competition, and we all get, I know in our court, we get applications from all over the country, West Coast and East Coast, and it's a competitive process. There's no question about it. You have to present your best foot forward, and maybe we can help you a little bit on that today. But what do you think about selection of clerks?
Well, I think
judges.
I agree. Judge Niemeyer and I are very close friends. We find we agree on almost everything. It's good to apply, I think, to a wide range, and unless you've got your heart set on an appellate or a district court clerkship, most of you would enjoy both. You might enjoy one more than the other, however. I don't think you ought to apply to a judge that you really don't think you want to clerk for, because it creates an awkward situation if you get offered a position from that judge and you just don't want to do it. So it's sort of a waste of everybody's time. But I think you have to apply to a broad number, because you just don't know what the criteria are. Some judges favor certain law schools. Some will only take one clerk from one law school. You don't know. But judges want to mix male, female. They're not wonderfully good reasons why a judge might select one person over another.
It's irrational, isn't it?
It's quite irrational. I mean, a judge may have two male clerks and want to select a female clerk, and there's a tremendous male clerk that may want to clerk for him or her and doesn't get selected, and vice versa. So it's the one thing I can tell you is that all the judges always have fewer positions than they would like, that they almost always genuinely enjoy the people that are interviewed, certainly 3/4 of them, and wish they had enough positions to make those offers. So it's hard to call people up or write them and tell them that you're not going to give them a spot when you know they do a terrific job, and you would enjoy getting to know them better. The judges, on the other hand, I think realize that you have special considerations. You have spouses or boyfriends, girlfriends. You have places, family, where you'd rather live. Some of you will prefer to be in a particular location for all those reasons, and maybe others that we don't even know about. So most of us will give you some time to think about it, but it doesn't always happen. And I think I come down the same way as Judge Niemeyer, that if you get an offer, and if you don't know that you're going to get an offer from somebody else, you better take it if you think you want to take the clerkship. But
unless you're so good, you're going to get an offer from anybody you interview.
Like all Duke students. I think those of us in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington get a whole lot of applications. I mean, depending on the year, we can get 500 or 600 applications a year. These are prime places for where people want to live, and probably 200 of those they're all top students. So it's a little bit of a lottery.
That raises a good point, though. There are judges that aren't in these areas that are wonderful clerkships. And if you're willing for a year to put up with a circumstance like Judge Irvin on our court was a wonderful clerkship. Judge Irvin was from Morganton, North Carolina, and he always had his clerks come down and interview in Morganton because he said it's a town of 15,000. That's where he kept his chambers. There was nothing there. You had to go hiking and this type of thing. And he made it clear to them that was it. And of course, his clerks loved him. He was a wonderful judge. And so those opportunities are less obvious than the ones that Judge Scirica is talking about in the big cities, Washington and New York and San Francisco and Los Angeles and all the cities where there are opportunities connected with it. For some reason, all the students apply to those cities, and there's no real need to do that. I know in our circuit, we have 2 judges, fairly recent appointees in Charleston, West Virginia, who I keep telling people are wonderful clerkships. They would be wonderful judges. I know them both. I'm good friends with them both. And yet, students say, who wants to go to Charleston, West Virginia? Well, it's terrific for a year. And so you ought to keep that type of thing in mind when you're looking, because it is a competitive, and you want a little bit of an angle on the competition and on the market. And one way to get a little bit of leverage on it is to research and find some of these clerkships. Who's a good clerkship and who's not, I don't know. But that's a judgment you have to make with some of your research and your professors. But I think generally the job is a good one. And there may be some cranky old judge who's got a terrible reputation, has stamps on his law clerks. I don't know of them, but I'm sure there must be, and maybe that wouldn't be one to apply to. But I think for the most part, there are quite a few judges who aren't in the mainstream. That might be, but you have to be prepared then to go to a remote geographical area, and but it does improve your possibilities in that regard.
Do you have any questions for us?
Do you want to talk about applications?
I was wondering if you could describe the difference in the relationship and the actual day-to-day work of a district court clerk and an appellate court clerk.
Well, we were both district judges and we were both circuit judges, and there's a big difference. As a matter of fact, I tell the interviewees that if they're applying to a district judge, the range of function that a clerk performs is much broader than for a circuit judge. And so it is more important for the student to find out how the judge uses the clerks and makes use of them. The job of a district judge, you have to manage a calendar, you have to decide motions, you have to conduct trials, you have to do sentencings. There are tons of motions that come in every day. Judges can put you to working on the motions. They can do correspondence. They can have you manage a calendar. They can have you do the complex things or the easy things. And so the range there varies from judge to judge as to how the clerks are used. On the circuit court, the job is much more homogeneous. It's basically it's to help the judge get ready for court, preparing bench memos and discussing the cases. And then after court, you attend court and hear the arguments. After court, helping prepare the opinions. And so that range of function is quite narrow. But I personally believe that is as exciting as the trial level. Now that's a very personalized thing because every single case is just a wonderful debate on what the law is, what it ought to be, and where it ought to go. And it's very reflective. We get in these big debates. Chambers are small. There's 6 of us. We have 2 secretaries and 3 clerks and myself. And some chambers have 4 clerks and 1 secretary and the judge. And it's a small community, and you have these cases that make a big difference, and you want to get it right, and you spend a lot of time debating it. And golly, I had a case here recently. It was the Titanic. The question is, who has the rights to the salvage of the Titanic in the North Atlantic? It's in international waters, not within any jurisdiction, and there's no law on it. And we're sitting there researching, and we're having a lot of fun. It took us a long time, but we went all the way back to the Code of Roads in 900 BC to find out the Admiralty Law, because it's still applicable among the nations, that same law. And but that's sort of fun. You get in there and doing that excitement. Now, the excitement of the district judge is this is where the trial court, this is better than television. You're seeing good lawyers try cases. I can tell you though, some of those cases drone too, don't they? You can almost fall asleep. But it's good and bad. So the variation.
The judge can fall asleep, but the clerk can't.
That's right. So I think it's a little bit, you can talk it up a little bit with some of your professors and some of each other and find out what you're interested in and identify your targets. And then you have to go about and prepare an application. And we can move on to that unless you want to talk more about judge selection and functions.
Question, when you're referring to researching a judge, is that, I mean, should we just look at the opinions they've written, or, you know, besides finding out who their past clerks were, what else can we do?
You can read their, I guess there are these judicial evaluations and so forth. I haven't seen, I know the one, there's a judicial almanac that comes out. I don't know how accurate it is. Sometimes it may be misleading. Another thing is to talk to some professors. They know a lot of the judges around. Another would be past clerks. You may have ideas on that.
I know that OCS, the Office of Career Services, has several commercial books that compile information, but we also have a notebook that past clerks, maybe you don't know this, they write in to tell us what their experiences were like.
I think a lot of law schools have that, and as a matter of fact, if you do clerkships, I think it's important that you keep that up, help the law school, help your fellow students later. That after you finished a clerkship, you write in and fill this book. But that book, I think a lot of the law schools have those.
There's probably an immunity from the law of defamation on these books. It's hard. It's hard to do that kind of research. I think you've got to rely on the law schools. They know most of the judges, most of the federal judges are going to be a good clerkship, and they'll know the people that are difficult. And there aren't that many. State judges, again, it depends where you are. You can find that out, and your school will help you with that. But I realize it's going to be difficult to dig in and figure, well, what the heck, it's just a year anyway, I'll get through it. I'm teasing. It's
I've never had any clerk, and not because of the particular clerkship, but just the function of clerking. I've never seen anyone say that it wasn't really one of the best things they've done. And
nobody wants to leave after a year.
Yeah. The big
We
plunge
kick
is
them
from
out of
clerkship into private practice. And,
Yeah, we all get a call about the second month saying, "Can I come back?" We always say, "Yes, of course." It's a nice experience as well as a valuable one. And I was a state court judge too, and in some ways, the most difficult decisions I had to make were as a state court judge. You have somebody on life support in a hospital, you're making a decision, life and death decision. Deciding custody between two fit parents.
how about elections?
That's right. Be a little old state judge and deciding who the president of the United States is going to be. So all the action is not in the federal courts.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit, unless there's more questions on whether you should do it. Our advice is you should if you think you can get one. And you say, well, how do I know whether I can get one? That's a self-evaluation business. It's pretty competitive, I think. If you're going to clerk on the Supreme Court of the United States, there's only 35 of them. So you've got to be one of the 35 in the country. If you're going to clerk on the circuit courts, there are about 160 judges, and each has about 3, so maybe 500 circuit clerkships. If you're going to do a district judge, there's maybe 700, 800, 900 district judges, and each gets 2, so there's a couple thousand there. And then, of course, the highest courts in the states, most of them have 5, 7 judges. I don't know how many clerks they have generally, but there are quite a few around, and the competition probably is related to the number available. I can tell you what I look for in an application, and I think Judge Scirica ought to share his views, and I'll try to even reveal some little private things that we look at and see if that helps. But you obviously need a cover letter, the reason I mention that is because I think it's very important, the cover letter, and we'll talk about that. You need a resume. In our chambers, you need a writing sample and your transcript and letters of recommendation. The letters of recommendation are very important, and they're sort of hard to get. They're a pain for you to get because you have to, you're looking for a professor who knows you enough, and you say, well, how do I get to know a professor, especially in 1 year? And that is a problem, and I think the school's going to have to help you more than we can help you. But it is really quite important because we look at you during the interview of a short period during a day. I usually talk to law clerks about a half hour, 45 minutes, and then my law clerks talk to them for another hour or so. And we have to make our judgment from that and the record and any phone calls we can make based on your recommendations. If you've got a nice relationship with a professor, or you have a seminar or something that's developing, or you're a research assistant or something like that, that's very helpful to take advantage of that relationship and see if the professor will go to bat for you and write a little bit something about you, because from our point of view, the professor knows you better than we can get to know you in that short time. And I think that's a meaningful type of thing to have that recommendation. How many recommendations, it's up to you. I think most of the applications come with about 3 letters. But that's what I have on mine, and I think most of them come in, have that packet of material. And I'm going to just speak briefly to the cover letter, and then I'll let Tony see what his thing is. The cover letter is a little bit like you walk in the room and I see you for the very first time, or you see me for the first time, I walk in the room, and you've made some judgments about me immediately, just from what you see. And the cover letter is the same thing, that judgment, that we have 0 information when we get the application. And the very first things you see are the cover letter. And your cover letter will never make your application, but it can break it. And if it's a lousy cover letter, it creates a lousy impression. And if it's a nice, clean, short cover letter, it gets you into the next page, which is your resume probably. I think if you're worried about it, write a very short cover letter. If you want to put something in like, I'm a student at, a second-year law student at Duke University, and applying for a clerkship for the year 2003, 2004, whatever it is. And maybe one additional factor that what you're proud of, maybe your grade rank or your law review or moot court or some performance, and you'll be receiving recommendation letters from professors A, B, and C. That does the job. It tells who you are, what university you're from. It gives 1 or 2 highlights, but it does not help for you to say, I'd be a good candidate because I write well. I'm a strong advocate, I've learned, or I'd like to apply to your chambers to clerk because it would help my litigation skills. Well, we know that. And it's not, I'm not trying to put that down, but the idea is that you're making a first impression, and you don't want to be braggadocious, but it doesn't hurt to put a couple of the highlights in the cover letter. And it ought to be clean and neat. You ought to have somebody read it. And I would say the same with the resume. It ought to be a little understated. Too much braggadocious comes through. It puts your real achievements, it puts them in doubt. And you got...
Well, I told you that we're going to agree on just about everything here. I remember a couple of years ago, I got a cover letter, the most shocking purple that I've ever seen. And I remember it was the secretary's remarks, and it was just, the fellow was from California, as you might imagine. Are there any Californians here? But it struck me as kind of funny that anyone would do something like that.
I have one like that. It's a fellow, must have been a good candidate, but I never looked further. there's a fella from Harvard, and he started out and he says, "Greetings from Cambridge." That was the way he started.
That kind of stuff is.
And then he said, "You might be interested in me because of this and this." And then he said he wanted to tell me about a typical day that he goes through. So he took me how he jogs and what he has for breakfast and all the way through. And it was about 2 pages long. It actually was nicely done and fairly well written, but what's your reaction to that? It doesn't quite fly, I think. It's a little self-centered and
Yeah. I think, judges are going to, if they catch a hint of arrogance or self-centeredness, they're going to shy away from that. And I quite agree. I think something that's just absolutely straightforward is the best thing.
what do you, how do you do your initial screening? And they might be interested in that.
Well, I mean, I do initial screening by law schools and by recommendations. I mean, I know that that from Harvard, Yale, Penn, Duke, Virginia, Chicago, Michigan, Stanford, and so forth, if there's already been a screening. And then I look at the records, I look at the letters of recommendation. I want to have writing experience. It doesn't have to be law review, the top law review or the main law review. It can be other reviews. But it's important for you to have had writing experience if you want to clerk on an appellate court. And I've had some very fine clerks who were not on the main law review in their law schools. I've found at our level that the better clerks tend to be those who have not gone directly from college to law school. And it's been a while since I've taken a clerk that has gone that route directly. And I've even taken clerks who have spent a year on the district court. And they see things differently than recent graduates from law school. And they can be helpful in ways that other clerks aren't. So it's nice to see what kind of life experience the people have had, whatever it's been. You don't all have to do something that's exciting or fascinating, but you've seen a bit of the world. You understand a lot of human concerns that you may not if you had gone directly to law school from college. I don't know whether other judges feel that way, but I've pretty much come to that conclusion, and I'm sure I will break that rule from time to time. The interviews, of course, are all a lot of fun, and as I said in the beginning, probably 3/4 of the people that I interview, I would very much like to have clerk for me, and so it's
do you
always
have
a very
4
hard
and
decision.
1 or 3 and 2?
I have 3. I have a 4th clerk because of the rules stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I have a rules committee assignment, and I have another clerk just to handle those kinds of matters. But I just have 3 regular clerks. The writing sample I look at very carefully, even though we know that if it's for a journal, it has been edited quite a bit, but still it tells you something about the writing style. The opinions that are written at the appellate level, unless the judge does them entirely on his own, are the product of a lot of collaboration between the clerk and the judge. And usually by the time that you end up with a final draft, the judge has really transformed that opinion to the way that he or she wants. To the extent that a clerk can write clearly and use an active voice and has a good feel for proper syntax, it helps to get to that point. And if a judge has to restructure the opinion or really to rewrite all of the sentences, I think most of us feel that's not a great use of our time. We want to spend time on the salient facts and also on the holdings and how broadly, how narrowly we want to write. So writing, if you're going to be an appellate clerk, you have to like writing and enjoy working through these kinds of problems. If you don't enjoy that, then the trial clerkship would be more fun for you. Any questions about any of these things?
I can say about the application itself. The purple paper is a good comment. Another good comment is to have somebody look at it and see if it looks neat, clean, and raises your strengths. I think the idea of listing everything you've ever done isn't as good as being selective and advancing that which you think is your own strength. And you don't have to categorize your own strength. You can demonstrate it by what you've accomplished. And sometimes, if you've been a reporter for a college newspaper, or were a cartoonist, or a ballet dancer, or you performed the violin, I think all of those are interesting aspects. And the truth of the matter is they catch the eye. And when you put together a group of clerks in chambers, you're putting together a group of people, not just automatons. And my whole purpose for the interview is to find out the dimension of the person and to see whether that person could work in close quarters with the other clerks. When I extend an offer and hire the first clerk, then the second one I hire is with the first one in mind, trying to make them fit. That's why it's totally irrational. It may be that the second, there are a whole bunch of people that are better qualified, but you sort of end up saying, well, they'd make a nice group. Those three would make a good group. They'd work together. And they're just guesses. They're arbitrary guesses. But
you want to have a happy chambers.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it can be a very, very long year.
Yeah.
And not so much for the judge, but for the other clerks, because the judge is insulated from a lot of that. So we think very carefully about compatibility of the clerks. I've got to run too. I'm late for my court.
I'll see you.
I'll see
All right,
you.
okay.
I'll leave.
I'll stay as long as you want.
Hands, yeah.
Yes, sir.
As far as writing experience and recommendations are concerned, do all of them have to be law related?
Oh, I just want to get my stuff.
All have to be from law
Okay.
professors, and writing experience all of them.
You. Good. Good to see you.
He's still on the mic, is he out there?
Let me get my stuff. Yeah, I just.
Hey, Tony? He's going to be all the way down the hall. He's going to be in the moot court room across here, and he's going to be asking questions about this Ferguson versus South Carolina, and you're going to start hearing him. Well, I think they're grabbing it. The question was, what kind of recommendations and what kind of writing samples? And
The writing experience, actually.
yeah, I
those
think
two sort of-
I think any writing experience is good. I share Judge Scirica's view that writing's important. Actually, I think it's important for law school. I think it's important for district clerking and for federal circuit clerking. And those of you who have some talent in writing are finding that you're being helped by it. Those of you who have trouble with writing are finding that if you improve your writing, you're going to improve your grades. It's just the form of communication that it's just helpful in our profession. And to the extent you can help yourself in that area, it's great. But I think any experience is good. I've had a lot of people apply who'd submitted columns to Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and had them printed, and did a travel magazine or whatever. But your application shouldn't get too far afield. In other words, the real purpose still, the best, you have to have, I think, at least one or two recommendations from the law school. And the best evaluator would be some work you did here at the law school.
This is 2 points related to that. One, when I was clerking, we did clerks perform the first screen, and one is a purple paper story, but a potential clerk or prospective clerk sent in his fiction. And you know, my judge was fairly Southern gentleman, and the fiction had sex scenes in it, and there was no way that was going to get beyond. And you have to, this is just an awareness of audience, right? And I don't think anyone here would do this, but if you're going to send something that's not straight legal writing, be aware that not everyone is going to receive it as your friends do, or your teacher did, or your parents do, that there's going to be a different set of eyes brought to it.
That's a good point.
On the piece of legal writing, the advice I always give to people who come to me to ask, what should I used to be the director of the writing program here, so I used to have more students come to me. But the advice I give is not to submit the entire 25 or 28 page brief for a couple of reasons. One, you're unlikely to read it all, and you'll be then skipping around and looking at different sections, and you, the writer, have no control over the sections that the judge will look at. And the second reason is it's almost impossible to make 25 or 28 pages error-free. But it is possible to take a portion of it, 8 pages of a coherent argument, section of the argument that's coherent, and then make that as error-free as possible, but then contextualize it for the judge by putting a little blurb at the top that explains what the assignment was and how it all fits together. Is that consistent with what you do?
Very much so, very much so. I don't read the whole thing. I read enough where I can get a feeling for the ability of the student to communicate, and I think it's important. I do rely heavily, though, like Judge Scirica, on recommendations. What I do in chambers, and I'll tell you what we do, and since Duke is a favorite school, I don't have to say this, but what I do is I pull out 11 schools from the pile, and we stack those. And then I have a 12th pile, which are the best students from the other schools, and as a 12th school, so that every applicant from the 11 schools gets, we look further, and then the 12th stack are the ones who are the better students from the other law schools. And as I said, Duke is one of my 12 that I put on the table, but I don't need to tell you that. You know Duke's a good law school, and that's why you're here, and there has been a selection process already that gets you ahead of the pack in a sense, but it's still competitive. And then we look at those schools and look who's there, and it's the strangest things what sticks out and what doesn't. And my clerks help me. We're very much at each other's elbows. I mean, it's very close chambers. We talk very freely. There's nobody's posturing. There's no competition. And we have a job to do. And when we're selecting clerks, at that point they want to be helpful, and they'll look through and what they like. And so the question is, can you project someone who would like you from your resume? And there's a little bit of an art in that, and I think, I'm not sure we're the better to tell you that, how to do that, but we can tell you that there is a difference in resumes. And I just had from one of the top law schools this past season, somebody who was #1 in the class from a major law school didn't get interviews from any of the 4 or 5 judges I know who hired from that law school. And something in that resume was causing a problem. And I can't tell you what it was, but I didn't invite him in either. And so it's not just, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best, but I'm a human being, and I've got qualities, and these are my qualities, and somebody will look at them and say, that's who I want to interview and talk to. It's not that bad. And if you got a sense of humor, you can use a little of that. Actually, I had one guy, my son went to Dartmouth, and one guy was at Michigan, and he wrote me a letter, cover letter, and his very last sentence was, I had trouble hitting your, no, he said, I was the only guy in the fraternity that could hit your son's curveball. And that's all he said, just the one sentence. I thought that was terrific. It just happened to, it doesn't improve the qualifications, obviously, but I still remember it. What other aspects do you want to hear about or talk about on this? The interview, I can tell you a little bit about the interview if you want. The interview, if you go in for an interview, You've got to be, I think, yourself. The problem I think that everybody has is interview anxiety, and you get uptight, and you want to make an impression, and you put on facades and things, and if you can try to force yourself to be your natural self, even if it's serious or it's humorous or whatever it is, you want to treat the whole moment as a serious moment. But the judge is trying to get a feel for how you'll be in chambers, and you're also interviewing. You're trying to see whether you'd want to clerk for that judge. And that's why I have my law clerks talk to him too, because sometimes you will talk easier and more at ease with the law clerks who have just come out of law school than the judge. And if the law clerks come back and said, oh boy, I think that person's going to be tough to work with, or I think we have better people, that makes a difference. So there's a little bit of, there's no magic in it. And I say it's arbitrary because I'm sure we're not necessarily picking what objectively would say would be the very best candidates. We're picking people and matching people. And so it may be you're the right person for a particular judge. And if you think in your own evaluation of your own record and your abilities, you have you think you can do it and want to do it, I'd really encourage you to pursue it.
Judge Scirica mentioned how it's better to not come straight from college into law school, and
that's the only place I disagree with him on.
I was going to ask you about that, if that was a general feeling or if that was something that you needed to work around.
I've heard that from several judges, that they would prefer to have somebody who's had a little experience, life experience or something. I've had wonderful experiences. Most of my clerks go right through school, college, law school, and clerk. And the bigger question for me along that line would be is if you're a 3L and I'm getting your application. I will ask myself, the one question I'll ask myself is why didn't he or she apply as a 2L? And sometimes it is because they didn't get selected as a 2L or didn't go as wide. I had somebody interviewing recently who was that, and it's better to provide an explanation in the cover letter. And there are explanations. If it says you weren't selected, I wouldn't say anything, and I would just apply again. It's nothing wrong with applying the third year. But somebody did that and didn't give an explanation, and I asked her, I said, I was noticing you were applying as a 3L. And she said, very candid, she said, I don't think I sent out enough applications as a 2L. I wanted a clerkship and I didn't get one. And I thought that was dynamite. It was telling like it is, and she had a good record, a wonderful record. And so that type of explanation may be needed. But this year I have, well, I have Pam Quinn from Duke. She was here last year. I have a fellow from Harvard, came right out of, went to undergrad. He keeps saying he's now married, and I said, well, when are you going to start your family? He says, well, I need to mature more before I can do that. And so he's very young. He feels he's very young, but he came right through. And then my third clerk is from Virginia and did do some teaching and got another degree. I understand what Judge Scirica is saying, but I don't think it wouldn't be determinative for me, and I think for a lot of judges.
So it shouldn't be something to
I wouldn't be, no, I wouldn't be concerned about that myself.
Do you think that there are any regional preferences? I've heard that in Massachusetts, judges like people who are from Massachusetts originally.
There's a little bit of that. I don't think it's universal, and I don't even think it's a majority, but I think some judges, and you may sense this more on the district level than the circuit level, would feel that there's a mutual contribution. The clerk is giving the judge service, and the judge is giving the clerk experience and the fact that you're that judge's clerk. And there may be a feeling with some judges that they would like for you to be in the area or the region at least. I don't sense a lot of that. I have sensed a little bit of that. I think it's for many, probably a large majority of the district judges, it's still a national competition, and for the circuit, it's clearly national. As a matter of fact, I find that a lot of the applicants write feeling like they have to justify to apply to me in Baltimore. They say, oh, I have an interest in practicing in the East or something. And they're probably writing with that type of concern. I would not address that necessarily at all. If you want to apply to a New Mexico judge, I'd just do it. And they're getting them from all over. And I don't think there's, and if there's a preference, you're not going to know about it anyway, but I don't think it's prevalent. And now, from your point of view, you're going to practice in Boston and want to go to a law firm there. There might be an advantage for you to have clerked on the district court in Massachusetts, because when you're clerking for the year, you'll get to know not only your judge, but the other judges on that court and the clerks there. And so that when you go into practice, now you have an outlook as to how that court operates, how the judges operate, and so forth. And that is an advantage from your point of view. On the circuit court, it's less because, number one, you're not going to have as many cases going to the circuit court, whereas when you're a practitioner, you're always going over to the district court there. And so I would say there's probably more of a connection, geographical connection, with your practice in the court on the district level than on the circuit. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be.
With the application times regressing all the way back to the end of September at this point, do you think there's going to be a new move to stabilize a new set date either at this time or later? Or do you think it's going to keep regressing or sort of naturally stabilize at this time?
There's some very difficult problems, and I think everybody would like stability. The law schools would, the judges would, but there are difficulties with every kind of system you can devise. One that I've heard some talk about, and I think Richard Arnold and Judge Posner in Seventh Circuit, some of them are looking in the possibility of doing what the residents do, matching up by computer. You put your first 3 judges down, and I put my first 3 clerks down, and then we match. The difficulty with that proposition is that you would have to conduct so many interviews, and I would have to conduct so many interviews,